Hi, this is Fresh Oil Releases, and this message title, Touch Not the Oil and the Wine, comes from Revelation 6 verse 6. This phrase has always intrigued me, and so for some months I've been doing a study into the oil and the wine and what this could possibly be referring to. So this message is really more of a study and sharing the things I've discovered than a mind-blowing prophetic word. But it does contain important keys in it. During the last 2 months before the fall feasts, which are Av and Elul, one is busy tying up the loose ends for the season before 5782 ends and Rosh Hashanah 5783 begins. 2 things that happen in these 5th and 6th months are the first fruits offerings of the wine and the oil. We know about the 7 weeks being counted from Passover to Pentecost or Shavuot, and the wheat first fruits being offered on the 50th day, after the counting of the Omer. But something less well known and recorded by the Essenes at Qumran is that straight after Pentecost, when the wheat first fruits was offered, another 7 weeks was counted before the first fruits of the grape harvest are offered, and then a further 7 weeks is counted until the first fruits of the oil is offered before the Lord. Joel 2 verse 24 says, "And the threshing floors shall be full of grain, and the vats shall overflow with new wine and oil." This passage describes the Lord's blessing after removing an attack brought on by the people's sinful state. So new wine and oil and fullness of harvest is a sign of God's blessing and favor. According to the Essenes' comprehensive records, the new wine offering, which was called the Pentecost of wine, was done on the 3rd of Av, and the Pentecost of oil was celebrated on the 22nd of Elul. These were significant markers for the farming community because until the first fruits offering had been done, the harvests of the ripe crops in the fields were not allowed to be brought in or consumed. So the first fruits offering of each harvest indicated the starter's gun and permission for the rest of the harvest to be brought in. On top of that, the book of Jubilees, chapter 32, tells us that for the priests, once the first fruits of the new crop had been offered, the remaining wine or oil was considered corrupted and was burnt with fire. And the book of Jubilees says, "For in its year shall the seed be eaten till the days of the gathering of the seed of the year, and the wine until the days of the wine, and the oil until the days of its season. And all that is left thereof and becomes old, let it be regarded as polluted, let it be burnt with fire, for it is unclean. And thus let them eat it together in the sanctuary, and let them not suffer it to become old." So we see that oil and wine of a past season was not allowed to be used or function in the sanctuary. This is quite an important spiritual principle because it's apparently vitally important to obtain fresh oil and oil of a new season. It will not do to keep on consuming the old wine or using the old oil. So, just as there is a first fruits barley company, which we've often spoken about, the wine and the oil first fruits also represent spiritual truths and prophetic pictures, and I've been exploring these things. The book of Revelation 6 verse 6 tells us that the angels were instructed not to hurt the oil or the wine during the roll-out of the judgment ride of the black horse. So who or what do these 2 crops represent? Oil and wine were applied to the wounds of the man wounded on the way to Jericho. So they both carry within them healing and restorative properties, and this is true in the natural as well as in the spiritual. The Lord referred to this scene on the Jericho road in a prophetic word I received for the year 5781. And this is what he said. The man on the Jericho road is a wounded world, left to die by those who ransack the nations for their own supplies. But my oil and wine are the kind who pour themselves out for others, and the spirit of Elijah will multiply their flour barrels. So it seems the oil and the wine can refer to certain groups of saints. The word speaks of 3 separate harvests, grain, wine, and oil. And according to Psalm 104, grain, wine, and oil have different purposes. Wine imparts gladness of heart or joy. Oil gives light or illuminates and glorifies. And Psalm 104 verse 15 tells us that grain made into bread strengthens the heart. So that verse 15 says this, wine that makes glad the heart of man, and oil to make his face shine, and bread which strengthens man's heart. So the wine and the oil saints have different assignments and portions or functions in the kingdom. As we are discussing the first fruits offering, it indicates there are 2 groups brought forth, presented to the Lord and released 50 days apart during the 5th and the 6th months, in order to trigger the rest of the harvests being brought in. Until these 2 first fruits offerings are presented before the Lord, no new wine or fresh oil can be experienced in the rest of the body. I asked the Lord what the wine and oil represent compared to the barley first fruits, and he explained that the barley first fruits company are the Melchizedek priesthood, emerging in the pattern of the firstborn from among the dead, and operating both as priests and kings. When explaining what the oil and wine represented, he said that they are 2 groups emerging from within the barley first fruits company, who are allocated different portions and assignments in the kingdom. And he said this, some are transformed, and they represent the wine first fruits. Others are transfigured, and these are the oil first fruits. So what is the difference? Transfiguration does not mean the same thing as the word transformation. Transformation implies a remodeling of the nature and structure of a person or an object. Transfiguration implies the revelation of the true nature within, and it is usually connected to glory. Jesus was revealed by displaying his true identity in heavenly places when he was transfigured on the mountain. He became clothed in glory light, which was his clothing in the throne room of the Father. So transform is a major change in form, nature, or function, usually into something better, but it's connected to the earthly realm. New wine is the contents of the solid grape, released to flow and expand in a liquid state, but still remaining the blood of the grape. Transfigure is to change something into something else, producing the image of the heavenly while still on earth. Oil is ignited and transfigured into fiery light, even while it's being held in an earthen vessel or oil lamp. It becomes a completely different substance, a flame of fire. The mortal puts on immortality, and it speaks about that in 1 Corinthians 15:53. So the oil first fruits are the portion of the bond-slave man-child company who are caught up to the heavenly state of being and are transfigured, receiving their immortal bodies, and return to carry out kingdom business, being unrestrained by earthly boundaries. They come from before the face of God like Moses did, and their faces shine with the glory of God. Having borne the image of the earthly, they now bear the image of the heavenly. Some people teach that the grape harvest is only about the judgment of the wicked, but it's also important to remember that Jesus called himself the vine and his followers the branches. And Genesis 49 also tells us that he binds his colt to the vine and washes his garment in wine. This word garment used here in Genesis 49 also means wife. So wine is used to cleanse the bridal company. And wine is poured out of a silver vessel onto the altar every day during the Feast of Tabernacles. The prophetic fulfillment of tabernacles is still to be experienced in the church, and so the grape harvest, or the harvest of the fruit of those who have abided in the vine, is necessary for the fulfillment of tabernacles. In fact, one of its names is the season of our joy, and wine brings joy to the heart of man. The wine first fruits are those abiding ones who have matured and become ready ahead of the rest of the harvest of those abiding in the vine. They are marked, separated from the rest of the field, brought near, pressed and transformed into a different way of being. It's no longer their season of abiding and growing in Christ, but now they are set apart, marked as belonging to God, empowered, changed, and released to impart the essence of Christ they hold within their bellies, bringing joy to those who are in mourning. Isaiah 61 speaks about the Spirit of the Lord being upon Jesus to bring the oil of joy for mourning. This can only be done by the empowering of the Spirit of the Lord. So the wine firstfruits are part of the bridal company, of whom it is said, "The roof of your mouth is like the best wine, causing the lips of those who are asleep to speak." That's Song of Songs 7 verse 9. The wine firstfruits impart a quickening, an awakening for those who are asleep, to prepare others for battle. Psalm 78 verse 65 says, "Then the Lord awakened as from sleep, as a strong man whose consciousness of power is heightened by wine." So we see that wine brings an alertness, an attentiveness, and an awakening to prepare for battle. Now both wine and oil firstfruits have a connection to putting off the old mantle and embracing the mantle of a new season. New wine must go into a new wineskin. This wineskin involves slaughter and preparation of a hide. Now a hide is a form of mantle or covering for the flesh of an animal. It is refashioned into something new. It becomes a receptacle to hold new wine. And new wine cannot be put in an old wineskin. Grapes also leave behind their old mantle or their skin when they are crushed and the juice is released. Previously, the interior or contents of the grapes was contained in set parameters inside the skins of the bunch of grapes. The destruction of the old mantle of the grape skins brings the juice into a wide open space, giving it ability and freedom to flow. There is a change of state from solid to liquid, and space to expand in the new wineskin. In one of the Psalms it says, "He brought me forth into a wide open space because he delighted in me." When the spies went into the promised land and they brought back the bunch of grapes from that region, do you know that it was the first fruit grapes that they brought back? Numbers 13 verse 20 says, "And be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land. And now the time was the time of the first ripe grapes." So they brought back the giant cluster for the first fruits wine offering. Now let's talk about fresh oil. Fresh oil saturates the torn up mantle of an old season. Old priestly garments were torn into strips to be used as wicks for the oil lamps in the temple. Oil is a liquid, but it is transformed into a gas or a flame using the wick. The new mantle for the oil is a covering of light. The word says he makes his messengers a flame of fire. Now, wine cannot be transfigured or turned into something quite other. Only oil can be transfigured or changed into a flame of fire and clothed with a garment of light. And this can only happen if you are willing to let go of your old priestly garment and allow it to be consumed, saturated with oil and consumed by fire. Oil releases light. This is being changed from one form or one substance to another. The word says that we shall be changed in the twinkling of an eye. This is what happens to oil when the saturated wick is ignited. It helps us to understand what the baptism of fire experience is. It brings transfiguration. Oil is liquid. It can be quantified, measured, and held in a container. But once fire is applied, it is transfigured into light, which cannot be contained and has the power to drive back the darkness. The wick of the priestly garments of an old season provide the transition bridge or the avenue for the fire to ignite. Old garments must be discarded, destroyed, torn into strips, and saturated with oil from the belly of the earthen vessel before transfiguration can take place. So we must be willing to let go of the old season, the old appointed place of ministering, the old identity, the old way of doing things. We must be willing to tear up our old mantles and burn our bridges to the old season. Where do we see this happening in the Word? Elisha destroyed the plough and his 24 oxen with fire before beginning the transition to receiving the double portion mantle from Elijah. He burnt his bridges. There was no going back. He couldn't plough the fields anymore. He had nothing to plough with. He died to the old chapter, and after crossing the Jordan, he went from wearing a servant mantle to a double portion prophet mantle. Ruth's widow's mantle at the threshing floor was filled with barley, and then within that 24-hour period, she exchanged her widow's mantle for the bridegroom's prayer shawl, referred to as the wing of his garment. She went from a place of lack as a widow, a place of restraining, a place of a lack of inheritance, to being wrapped up in the wing of the kinsman redeemer's garment, and instantly the locked up inheritance that was stored up was released to be used. So let's dig a little bit deeper to try and understand these two groups, the wine and the oil. The new wine first fruits offering is mentioned in Isaiah 65, verse 8. It says, "Thus says the Lord, as the new wine is found in the cluster, and one says, 'Do not destroy it, for there is a blessing in it,' so will I do for my bondservant's sake, that I may not destroy them all. And I will bring forth an offspring from Jacob, and from Judah an inheritor of my mountains. My chosen and elect will inherit it, and my bondservants will dwell there." So we see here that the new wine group are part of the remnant, the survivors of the judgments. They receive an inheritance and an appointed dwelling place in God's mountains, and they are described as his bondservants. The new wine group are the bondservants of the Lord. New wine or first fruits wine is the Strong's word H8492. It's tirosh, and it means fresh grapes juice in the sense of expulsion as just squeezed out, by implication fermented or sweet wine. And it comes from the root word H3423. So even the meaning of the word new wine implies a pressing, the application of sustained and repeated pressure to bring about the transforming or release of the new wine. The root word H3423 means to occupy, possess, or inherit by driving out. This indicates a possessing of that which was formerly another's, the wealth of the wicked stored up for the righteous scenario, or the Israelites dwelling in the cities of those they drove out in the promised land. Inheritor, the word inheritor in verse 9, is the same word, to occupy or possess. The inheritors of the mountains come from Judah, those who were identified as the Lord's sanctuary. They are the forerunner tribe, leading the other tribes in following the cloud in the wilderness. So the new wine company are forerunners. They are inheritors of God's mountains. They are those who occupy, possess, and inherit by driving out. 3 days after the Pentecost of oil, on the 22nd of Elul, is the 25th of Elul. This is the anniversary of the first day of creation, when God looked at the chaos and void, and he said, "Let there be light." How fitting that 3 days before this in the calendar, the first fruits of new fresh oil harvest have been presented to him. This decree, "Let there be light," was followed by a separation and a delineation between light and darkness, with the naming of each according to their character. Concerning the transfiguration of the oil company, it is accompanied by a decree, "Let there be light," and then the baptism of fire is applied. In the twinkling of an eye, his messengers, who are flames of fire, are manifested. Before that, they just looked like earthen vessels with their bellies full of oil. But when the baptism of fire comes, they are identified as messengers who are flames of fire. Now let's not forget that both the wine and the oil are produced by pressing or crushing. So expect to be brought into a confined, narrow place in these next 2 months, and know that pressure, both in the spiritual realm and in natural circumstances, will be applied, with the express purpose of preparing the first fruits offerings of the wine and the oil before the fall feasts. This preparation of first fruits offerings takes place in the darkness of the early morning hours, in order for it to be ready for a wave offering on the appointed 50th day. Yes, 50 speaks of Jubilee, and it is a Jubilee day for those who are part of the new wine company, because it is a day of release and of flowing and of imparting and being used in a new way. But first comes the pressing in the night. And yes, the fresh oil company must supply the candlestick that's spoken of in Zechariah 4. The sons of oil must be filled before the baptism of fire is applied. But before the flowing and the filling comes the pressing. The word Gethsemane means oil press, and the man-child company will be going through a time of facing choices, of fully surrendering to the will of God, knowing the cup they are being asked to drink, before transfiguration can be experienced. You know, when I went to Israel, to the Garden of Gethsemane, I was so surprised to discover that there is also a wine press in the Garden of Gethsemane. And how fitting that Gethsemane, that means the place of pressing, the oil press, is also the place of the pressing or the trampling of the grapes to produce the new wine. The new wine is made ready for offering in the 5th month, on the 3rd of Av. Av is the month when righteous judgments have been applied to the house of God historically. It's the month when the temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av. The rest of the grape harvest is brought in during Av and Elul, and the blood of grapes fills the vats at the threshing floor during these months before Rosh Hashanah. The Pentecost of oil is in the 6th month, on the 22nd of Elul, 1 week before the Feast of Trumpets, Rosh Hashanah. The rest of the olive harvest continues to be brought in right through Tishri. Now new wine and oil are needed for a new season. The old supplies are considered defiled and no longer fit for use in the temple of God. So the Lord's eyes are going to and fro throughout the whole earth, seeking out his firstfruits wine and oil companies. Keep in mind that the intense pressing is unto the goal of transformation or transfiguration. This will help you surrender and endure its working. Also, be encouraged that both the oil and the wine are marked for protection during the riding of the black horse after the breaking of the 3rd seal, and we are headed right into the thick of the riding of the black horse and the days of famine. I'm going to follow this message with part 2 in a few days' time. May the Lord bless and encourage you. May he confirm to you things he's been sharing to your heart. May he give you deeper and wider revelation, wisdom and understanding of the things that I've shared with you. Amen.